I never thought I'd be the kind of person who cared too much about titles or recognition. My name's Cale Armitage, and for as long as I've worked at Sterling Tech Solutions, I've been perfectly content staying in the background, coding late into the night, troubleshooting bugs no one else could solve, and leading my team through challenges that would make most people throw their hands up in frustration. But now, sitting here in my cramped office cubicle while staring at the email from HR confirming Victor Sterling's promotion over me, I feel something I haven't felt in years. Anger. Not just anger, but betrayal. Project Horizon was my baby. It started as a rough sketch on a napkin during a late-night brainstorming session with Liam and Nina. We turned that sketch into something real. A revolutionary AI platform designed to revolutionize customer service interactions. And yet, somehow, Charles Sterling decided that his nephew, this flashy, arrogant kid fresh off a failed startup attempt in Europe, deserved to take over. Fresh perspective. They said, bullshit. Victor walked into our department meeting like he owned the place, which, technically, I guess he did. His suit was tailored so sharply it looked like it might cut someone if they got too close, and his smile was all teeth, no warmth. He introduced himself with an air of confidence that bordered on arrogance, talking about how excited he was to bring innovation to Project Horizon. Innovation? The man didn't even know what programming languages we used. Nina leaned over to whisper in my ear halfway through a spiel. He's going to ruin everything. Her voice was low, but there was no mistaking the frustration behind it. I wanted to tell her she was wrong, that maybe Victor wasn't so bad, but deep down, I knew she was right. Still, I forced myself to stay calm. Maybe he'd surprise us. Maybe he actually had some hidden talent buried beneath all that swagger. Spoiler alert, he didn't. The day Charles called me into his office will forever be etched in my memory. I remember the way he avoided looking me in the eye as he explained why Victor was taking over. It's nothing personal, Cale, he said, his tone almost apologetic. But we need someone younger, more dynamic, to lead this project to the next level. Younger? More dynamic? Was he implying I was old? Outdated? I bit back the words I wanted to say. Words about how I'd poured blood, sweat, and tears into this project, and instead nodded stiffly before walking out. When I returned to the office, the news had already spread. Everyone was whispering, glancing at me with pity in their eyes. I hated it. Hated feeling like I'd failed somehow, even though I hadn't. Not really. But failure has a way of creeping into your mind when the world decides you're expendable. Victor wasted no time making changes. Within days, he started tearing apart everything I'd built. He scrapped months' worth of work because it didn't align with his vision, whatever that meant. He brought in consultants who knew nothing about our goals and demanded daily progress reports that slowed everyone down. Worst of all, he insisted we move up the launch date by 2 weeks, despite the fact that we were still debugging critical issues. Liam cornered me after one particularly disastrous team meeting. Cale, we can't keep letting him do this, he said, his voice tight with frustration. He's going to crash the whole thing. I wanted to agree, but what could I say? That I'd tried reasoning with Victor only to be dismissed? That I'd gone to Charles, only to be told to support the new leadership? Instead, I just sighed and muttered something about doing the best we could. Things started falling apart faster than I expected. Code that had been stable for weeks suddenly broke under Victor's improvements. Deadlines slipped further and further behind schedule. Morale plummeted. One afternoon, I found Nina crying in the break room. She told me she'd overheard Victor blaming me for the delays, saying I'd left the project in shambles before handing it off to him. I'm sorry, Cale, she said between sniffles. I know it's not true, but what are we supposed to do? I didn't have an answer. All I could think about was how unfair it was, that after everything I'd done, I was being painted as a villain. Victor's press conference was the final straw. There he was, standing in front of reporters and investors, bragging about how far ahead of schedule we were. He promised a flawless launch and hinted at features we hadn't even finished developing. Watching him lie so brazenly made my stomach churn. Afterward, Nina pulled me aside. Cale, we have to do something. If this blows up, and trust me, it will, you're going to take the fall for it. She was right, of course. No matter how hard I tried to distance myself, Victor's failures would inevitably reflect on me. For the first time, I started considering drastic measures. Late one night, as I was working alone in the office, I received an anonymous email. Attached were encrypted files labeled Sterling Secrets. My heart raced as I opened them. What I found inside was damning. Evidence that Victor had deliberately sabotaged parts of the system to cover his tracks. He'd altered code logs, deleted key safeguards, and framed my original designs as flawed, all to make himself look good. I sat there staring at the screen, my mind racing. This was it. The proof I needed to expose him. But exposing him meant risking everything. Would anyone believe me? Or would they see me as a bitter ex-employee trying to stir up trouble? I couldn't do this alone. The next morning, I confided in Nina and Liam. At first, they hesitated, unsure if getting involved was worth the risk. But when I showed them the files, their expressions hardened. "We're with you," Liam said firmly. "This guy's destroyed enough. It's time someone took him down." Over the next few days, we worked tirelessly to gather more evidence. We documented every misstep Victor had made, every decision that had led to disaster. By the end of the week, we had a dossier thick enough to bury him. Walking into the emergency board meeting felt like stepping onto a battlefield. Every eye in the room turned to me as I placed the dossier on the table. Victor smirked, clearly thinking I was bluffing. But when I began presenting the evidence, line by line, screenshot by screenshot, his smirk faded. By the time I finished, the room was silent. Even Charles looked stunned. When Victor tried to defend himself, his excuses fell flat. Within minutes, he was escorted out of the building, his career in ruins. Taking back control of Project Horizon felt bittersweet. Yes, I'd proven Victor's incompetence, but the damage he'd done ran deep. Key team members had left, and those who remained were exhausted and demoralized. Still, I refused to give up. With Nina and Liam by my side, I rebuilt the project piece by piece. Slowly but surely, we regained momentum. And when Project Horizon finally launched, to glowing reviews and record-breaking success, I allowed myself a moment of pride, because sometimes the greatest victories aren't about proving others wrong. They're about proving to yourself that you can rise above adversity and come out stronger on the other side. Victor's departure didn't bring the sense of closure I'd hoped for. Instead, it left a void, a mix of relief and lingering resentment. The board meeting had been cathartic, sure, but now the reality of what we'd lost was sinking in. Half my team was gone. Some had quit in frustration under Victor's leadership. Others had been poached by competitors who saw Sterling Tech Solutions as a sinking ship. Even Liam, who had stood by me through everything, admitted he was considering other offers. "You've done all you can, Cale," Nina said one evening as we sat in the empty office, surrounded by boxes of files and half-empty coffee cups. But people don't forget something like this overnight. Trust takes time to rebuild. She was right, of course, but hearing her say out loud made the weight of it all feel heavier. Still, there was no time to dwell. We were weeks behind schedule, and the pressure from stakeholders was mounting. Every morning, I walked into the office knowing that failure wasn't an option. Not again. To keep morale up, I started holding daily check-ins with the remaining team members. At first, they were hesitant. Some barely looked me in the eye, but slowly, things began to shift. I made it clear that their input mattered, that we were rebuilding together. Liam stayed. Thank God. He became my unofficial second-in-command, helping bridge the gap between the old guard and the new hires we brought in to fill the gaps. One of those new hires, a quiet but brilliant engineer named Priya, quickly proved herself invaluable. Her fresh perspective reminded me why diversity in problem-solving is so crucial. But even as progress was being made, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were walking on eggshells. The scars Victor had left behind weren't just technical. They were emotional, and healing them would take more than lines of code or pep talks. Just when I thought things were stabilizing, Charles called me into his office again. This time, though, he wasn't avoiding my gaze. His eyes were sharp, almost predatory, as he gestured for me to sit. "Cale," he began, leaning back in his chair, "you did good exposing Victor. But let me be clear, this isn't over." "What do you mean?" I asked, my stomach tightening. He hesitated before answering. I knew Victor wasn't ready for a role like this. Hell, I knew he'd fail. But sometimes, failure is necessary to pave the way for change. My jaw dropped. You set him up? To fail? Charles nodded, unapologetic. Sterling Tech needed restructuring, and letting Victor crash and burn gave me the leverage I needed to push through reforms. Unfortunately, you got caught in the crossfire. I wanted to scream, to demand answers about how he could justify sacrificing careers, including mine, for his own agenda. But instead, I clenched my fists and forced myself to stay calm. For now, Charles's confession haunted me. How could he treat people, his employees, his own family, like pawns in some grand corporate chess game? It made me question whether I truly belonged at Sterling Tech anymore. Nina noticed my growing disillusionment. "Kale, don't let him win," she said during one of our late-night strategy sessions. "If you leave now, it'll be exactly what he wants. Stay. Finish what you started. Show him and everyone else that you're not just another cog in his machine." Her words struck a chord. Maybe staying wasn't about loyalty to Charles, or even to the company. Maybe it was about proving to myself that I could rise above the chaos and create something meaningful. With renewed determination, I threw myself into Project Horizon. Slowly but surely, the pieces began falling into place. The weeks leading up to the relaunch were brutal. Long hours turned into sleepless nights as we worked tirelessly to iron out the last remaining bugs. Priya discovered a critical vulnerability in the AI algorithm just days before launch, forcing us to rewrite entire sections of code. Through it all, I kept reminding myself and the team why we were doing this. Not for Charles, not for recognition, but because we believed in the potential of Project Horizon to make a difference. On the eve of the launch, I gathered everyone in the conference room. "Tomorrow," I said, looking around at their tired but determined faces, "we show the world what we're capable of. Let's finish strong." The day of the launch felt surreal. Reporters and industry leaders filled the auditorium, cameras flashing as Charles took the stage to introduce Project Horizon. When he handed the mic to me, I felt a surge of nerves, but also pride. For months, this project has faced challenges that would have broken most teams. I began, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through me. But tonight, we stand here not because of one person, but because of everyone who refused to give up. As I demonstrated the platform's capabilities, the room erupted in applause. Investors praised its innovation. Clients lined up to partner with us. By the end of the night, it was clear Project Horizon was a success. But as I watched Charles shake hands with reporters and smile for photos, I couldn't help but feel hollow. None of this changed the fact that he manipulated us all for his own gain. In the weeks following the launch, the accolades poured in. Promotions were offered, bonuses handed out. But when Charles approached me with a lucrative offer to lead a new division within the company, I declined. "I appreciate the opportunity," I told him, meeting his gaze head-on, "but I think it's time for me to move on." He looked surprised but didn't argue. Maybe he understood, or maybe he simply didn't care. Either way, it didn't matter. What mattered was that I'd finally found clarity. Leaving Sterling Tech wasn't easy. On my last day, the team threw a small farewell party. Nina hugged me tightly, promising to keep in touch. Liam handed me a bottle of whiskey, saying, "For when you need to remember where you came from." As I packed up my desk, I realized how much I'd grown, not just professionally, but personally. I'd learned to trust myself, to fight for what I believed in, and to walk away when necessary. Months later, I found myself mentoring young developers at a tech incubator in Cambridge. Teaching others gave me a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in years. Watching them tackle problems with passion and creativity reminded me of why I fell in love with technology in the first place. One afternoon, while grabbing coffee near Harvard Square, I ran into Nina. She grinned when she saw me. "So, how does it feel to be the guy everyone looks up to now?" I laughed. "Feels pretty good, actually." Looking back, I realized that success isn't defined by titles or recognition. It's about resilience, the ability to adapt, learn, and grow. Victor may have tried to destroy me, and Charles may have used me as a pawn, but in the end, I emerged stronger. Project Horizon taught me that true innovation isn't just about creating something groundbreaking. It's about building relationships, fostering trust, and refusing to compromise your values. Life moves forward, and so do I. Sometimes late at night, I think about those months at Sterling Tech. The highs, the lows, the lessons learned. They shaped me into the person I am today. And while I'll always carry a piece of that experience with me, I know it doesn't define me. Because in the end, it's not about where you've been. It's about where you're going. A few months after leaving Sterling Tech, I received an email from Liam. Attached was an invitation to a tech conference in San Francisco. Nothing unusual, except for one detail. Victor Sterling was listed as a keynote speaker. At first, I thought it was some kind of cruel joke. But when I clicked on the link to the event page, there he was, smiling smugly in his headshot. The title of his talk? Failure as a Stepping Stone. Lessons from My Biggest Mistake. Nina called me later that evening. "Are you going?" she asked, her tone somewhere between amused and incredulous. "I don't know," I admitted. Part of me wants to see what he has to say. Another part thinks it's better to leave the past buried. "Come on, Cale," she teased. "You can't tell me you're not curious." She had a point. Against my better judgment, I booked a flight. The conference hall buzzed with energy as I took my seat near the back, trying to blend into the crowd. When Victor stepped onto the stage, the audience erupted into applause. He looked different somehow, less polished, more human. "For years, I believed success was about appearances," he began, his voice tinged with vulnerability. "But then I failed, in front of everyone, publicly, painfully. And while it was humiliating, it taught me something invaluable. Failure isn't the end. It's the beginning." He went on to describe how losing Project Horizon and Sterling Tech Solutions had forced him to reevaluate his priorities. He spoke candidly about the mistakes he'd made, even naming me as the person who exposed his sabotage. When Cale Armitage presented evidence against me, I hated him for it, Victor confessed, his gaze scanning the room. But looking back, I realized he saved me from becoming someone I didn't want to be. I froze as his eyes locked onto mine. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then, to my astonishment, he walked off the stage and approached me. "Cale," he said, extending a hand. "Thank you." I hesitated before shaking it, unsure what to say. "Victor," and I ended up talking long after the conference ended. Over coffee, he shared how his public failure had humbled him, leading him to pursue work in nonprofit tech initiatives aimed at helping underserved communities. "I never wanted to hurt anyone," he admitted. "I just got lost in the idea of being successful without understanding what that really meant." As strange as it felt, I found myself believing him. People can change if they're willing to put in the effort. By the time we parted ways, I realized something important. Holding on to anger only weighs you down. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means choosing to move forward. That night, as I boarded my flight home, I felt lighter than I had in years. Life is full of twists and turns, victories and defeats. What matters most is how we choose to respond, to ourselves, to others, and to the world around us. Because sometimes the greatest triumph isn't proving your worth to others. It's finding peace within yourself.